There is a single object in our solar system that is worth $10 quintillion. Written out in full, that number is a 1 followed by 19 zeros. It is a sum so large that if it were somehow shared out equally among all 8 billion people alive on Earth today, every man, woman, and child would walk away with more than $1 billion each. It is roughly 100,000 times the size of the entire world economy, larger than everything that every nation on this planet produces in a year, multiplied 100,000 times over. This object is not a theory, and it is not a fantasy. It is a real body of rock and metal, about 226 kilometers across, drifting through the darkness between Mars and Jupiter. It has a name. It is called 16 Psyche, and at this very moment, a NASA spacecraft is falling through space toward it. A spacecraft that only weeks ago swung past the planet Mars and stole a piece of its speed. But the most astonishing thing about that $10 quintillion price tag is not how impossibly large it is. It is that the scientist who first calculated it will tell you, without a moment of hesitation, that the number is completely meaningless. This is the story of the most valuable object ever discovered, where its staggering price truly comes from, why that price is a kind of beautiful lie, and why NASA is spending more than $1 billion to reach something whose real worth has nothing to do with money at all. The figure was first worked out in 2017 by Lindy Elkins-Tanton, a planetary scientist at Arizona State University and the leader of the mission now on its way to the asteroid. Her calculation was, in her own words, a simple one. She took the amount of iron and nickel that Psyche is believed to contain, and she multiplied it by the going market price of those metals here on Earth. The result was 10,000 quadrillion dollars, a number that stopped being economics and started being astronomy wearing a dollar sign. It is worth sitting with how large that number really is, because the human mind is not built to hold it. The combined economic output of every country on Earth in a single year sits somewhere in the low hundreds of trillions of dollars. Psyche's theoretical value is measured in quintillions. Those two numbers are not close. They are not in the same neighborhood, or the same city, or the same country. One is roughly 100,000 times the other. The total debt carried by every government on the planet, the sum that shapes elections and topples economies, could be erased by this one asteroid tens of thousands of times over, and there would still be more left over than the world has ever produced. It helps to line the number up against things we already know. In all of human history, across every empire and every civilization that has ever dug for it, the total amount of gold ever pulled out of the Earth would be worth somewhere in the region of $15 trillion. Psyche's theoretical value is not twice that, or 10 times it, or even 1,000 times it. It is close to 1 million times the worth of every gram of gold that human hands have ever touched. The single most valuable company on the planet, at the very height of its power, is measured in a few trillion dollars. This one rock, by that same rough arithmetic, would be worth millions of such companies stacked one on top of another. For a body that most people have never heard of, quietly circling the sun far beyond Mars, it is a strange and almost obscene amount of wealth. And to understand where it comes from, we have to understand what this object actually is, because 16 Psyche is unlike almost anything else in the solar system. Psyche was discovered on the 17th of March, 1852, and it was named after the goddess of the soul in Greek mythology. For more than a century, it was just one more point of light in the great asteroid belt, the vast ring of debris that lies between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter, left over from the birth of the planets. It is one of the larger objects in that belt, stretched into the rough shape of a potato, about 226 kilometers along its longest axis. Set down on Earth, it would stretch across an entire small country. It is so massive that its gravity noticeably tugs on the paths of other asteroids passing nearby, which is one of the ways we have been able to weigh it from a distance. And yet, despite that pull on its neighbors, Psyche itself is a world almost without weight. Its own gravity is so feeble, barely 1/100th of the gravity we feel here, that a person weighing 80 kilograms on Earth would weigh less than a single kilogram standing on its surface. That surface also turns remarkably fast. Psyche spins all the way around once every 4 hours or so, which means that on this metal world, a full day and night flickers past roughly 6 times for every single day that passes on Earth. But size is not what makes Psyche extraordinary. Composition is. The overwhelming majority of asteroids are made of rock, or of ice, or of a loose rubble of both. Psyche appears to be made largely of metal. When astronomers studied the light reflecting from its surface and bounced radar off it from Earth, the signature that came back was not the signature of stone. It was the signature of iron and nickel, the same two metals that make up the core of our own planet. That single fact is what changed everything. Because a mountain of iron and nickel 200 kilometers wide is not just a scientific curiosity, and it is not just a fortune. It is a clue. It points to a history far stranger and far more violent than the quiet orbit Psyche keeps today. And it hints that this object may be something we have never been able to study. Something hidden inside every rocky world, including our own. The leading explanation for Psyche is one of the most dramatic ideas in planetary science. It is that Psyche is not really an asteroid at all, but the exposed core of a planet that died before it was ever finished. In the chaos of the early solar system, more than 4.5 billion years ago, rocky worlds were beginning to form. As they grew, the heaviest material, the iron and the nickel, sank to their centers and formed dense metal cores, exactly as it did inside the young Earth. But that early era was also a shooting gallery of colossal impacts. According to this theory, one of those forming worlds was struck again and again by other bodies, and the repeated collisions blasted away its entire rocky outer shell, its mantle and its crust, and flung them into space. What survived was the naked metal heart, the core, left exposed and orbiting alone. If that is true, then Psyche is not a rock. It is a corpse. It is the frozen heart of a planet that never got to live. And that is why this object matters far more than its price. Our own Earth has a core just like it. A vast sphere of iron and nickel, roughly 2,900 kilometers beneath our feet, burning at around 5,500 degrees. That core generates the magnetic field that shields us from the sun, and it drives much of what happens on the surface. Yet we will never see it, and we will never reach it. The deepest hole humanity has ever drilled is the Kola super-deep borehole in Russia, which took around 20 years of effort and reached a depth of just over 12 kilometers before it had to stop. 12 kilometers. That is not even half of 1% of the way down to the core. We have barely scratched the skin of our own world. Psyche offers something we can never get at home. It offers the chance to fly to a planetary core that is already lying open in the sunlight, and to study directly the thing that hides at the center of every world like ours. Lindy Elkins-Tanton, the very scientist who produced the $10 quintillion figure, is also the first person to explain why it is meaningless. There are two reasons, and both are worth understanding. The first is simple. There is no technology on Earth, and nothing close to it, that could bring an object like Psyche home. It is a body 200 kilometers wide, hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and the idea of dragging it back to Earth belongs to science fiction, not to any engineering that exists or is likely to exist for a very long time. But the second reason is the truly interesting one. because it reveals something strange about the nature of value itself. Suppose that we could somehow bring all that metal back. The instant we did, the fortune would evaporate. Iron and nickel are valuable on Earth for one reason only, and that reason is scarcity. They are worth mining because there is a limited amount of them within easy reach. Deliver $10 quintillion of iron to the surface of the planet all at once, and the price of iron would not stay where it is. It would collapse. It would fall towards zero, because the entire market would drown in supply. The treasure destroys itself the very moment it is touched. The $10 quintillion number was never really a price. It was a mirror. In what it reflects is not the wealth of the asteroid, but the strangeness of how we decide what anything is worth. And if that number still seems too enormous to be a mere illusion, consider this. Psyche is not even the richest rock out there. Another metal-bearing asteroid, called Davida, has been given a theoretical value closer to $27 quintillion, nearly 3 times higher. The asteroid belt is scattered with these priceless, worthless worlds. The money was always a story we told ourselves to make the sky sound interesting. The real reason to cross the solar system was hiding underneath it the whole time. So NASA is not flying to Psyche for the gold. It is flying there for the answer. And the price of that answer is worth pausing on, because it is a comparison all its own. The entire Psyche mission, the spacecraft itself, the launch, and years of operation across the solar system, cost somewhere north of $1 billion. Set that budget against the $10 quintillion object it is chasing, and it amounts to roughly 1/10 billionth of the target's imaginary worth. We are spending what is, by comparison, a rounding error to reach the richest thing ever discovered. And we are doing it not to seize the treasure, but simply to understand it. The mission was chosen in January of 2017, and the spacecraft, also named Psyche, launched on the 13th of October 2023, lifting off from the Kennedy Space Center on one of the most powerful rockets in service. It does not burn its way across the solar system with conventional engines. Instead, it glides, using a bank of solar electric thrusters that ionize xenon gas and push it out in a faint blue glow, a gentle but relentless force that builds enormous speed over months and years. The journey it must make is around 3.6 billion kilometers, and it will take roughly 6 years to complete. To read the asteroid when it arrives, the spacecraft carries a small suite of instruments, including cameras led by the planetary scientist Jim Bell, and spectrometers to identify the elements on the surface. But the cleverest tool on board is the magnetometer, and its logic is beautiful. If Psyche really is the frozen core of a dead planet, then it may still carry the fossil of that planet's magnetic field, locked into its metal from the day it solidified. A rock cannot hold such a field. Only a true metal core can. So if the magnetometer detects an ancient magnetism frozen into Psyche, it will be as close to a fingerprint as we could ever hope for, the signature of a planetary heart. And the mission has already passed its hardest test so far. On the 15th of May 2026, the spacecraft swept past Mars, coming within just 4,600 kilometers of the planet's surface. It was not there to study Mars. It was there to steal from it. By flying close, the spacecraft borrowed a fraction of the planet's gravity, which flung it forward and bent its path toward the outer belt without burning a single gram of fuel. The maneuver added around 1,600 kilometers per hour to its speed and tilted its course by about 1 degree. And it was executed so precisely that the navigation team described it as a perfect shot. The spacecraft is now aimed directly at its target, and it is scheduled to arrive in August of 2029. For all the talk of a solid metal world, the most recent measurements have raised a quiet and fascinating problem. When scientists weighed Psyche by its gravity and compared that to its size, the density that came back was far too low. A ball of solid iron and nickel that size should be dense and heavy. Psyche is not. It is light enough that it cannot possibly be pure metal. Instead, it appears to be shot through with cracks and empty space and a great deal of rock, perhaps only a third to a half metal by volume, rather than the gleaming iron sphere of the early imagination. So perhaps Psyche is not a clean planetary core after all. Perhaps it is a broken, rubble-strewn mixture of metal and stone. Perhaps its history is stranger than a simple stripped planet. And perhaps it is a kind of object for which we do not yet have a name. Elkins-Tanton has been open about exactly this. She has said, plainly, that we do not know what Psyche is, that we will not know until we get there, and that she fully expects to be surprised. That uncertainty is not a weakness in the mission. It is the entire reason it exists. We are not crossing the solar system to confirm something we already understand. We are going because there is a 200-kilometer object out in the dark that does not fit anything we know. And the only way to find out what it is to go and look. In August of 2029, after 6 years and 3.5 billion kilometers, the spacecraft will slip into orbit around Psyche and begin to circle it for 26 months, spiraling closer and closer, mapping every crater and ridge of a world made of metal. For the first time in history, we will see up close what may be the naked heart of a planet that died before the Earth was even born. The $10 quintillion was never the point. It was the bait, a number so absurd that it made the whole world turn and look at a rock it would otherwise have ignored. The true treasure was never the metal we could sell. It was the answer buried inside it, a direct glimpse of the thing that lies hidden at the center of every rocky world, including the 2,900 kilometers of iron burning silently beneath our own feet right now. And Psyche is only one object in a belt full of them. Out there in the same dark ring, other worlds are waiting that break our rules just as badly. Objects we have barely begun to understand. But those are stories for another day.